Well, that's what you do, you know. So he was going to do, the stand up. They gave him 5, 7 minutes, something like that. And it's not for everybody, right? The jokes weren't landing. Silent, dead silence up there telling jokes. It's tough. It's a tough business. I think you got to be funny. That's what it is. If you're not funny, you're just up there and you're saying things, and he's talking about like hot dogs and Bed Bath and Beyond, and I don't know, cassette tape. It was just bad. We stopped listening after a while. You get embarrassed for somebody. I would just say, yeah, it's not for everyone. That's the lesson here. Steve Weiner here with GetRubix.com, and today we are back with the GetRubix podcast. By now you've probably figured out I do these just whenever I feel like it, or when I can get someone interesting to come on and talk to. And this was really good. Today you're going to hear from Max Allen. Max I met only a month ago at a like a tech summit thing, and we met through some mutual contacts who I've worked with before and he's worked with before. But it was one of those things. Sometimes you meet somebody and it's like, oh, I could have been talking to you for 10 years, and we're into the same stuff. But Max does a lot of work in the modern endpoint space, and has done a lot with Azure Log Analytics, which definitely a wealth of resource, has contributed to some major community projects, and he's going to talk to us about log analytics automation. And we ended up having a really good conversation, so I think you're going to enjoy this one. No, I'm not getting up there because I got no jokes. None of this is funny. This is just these are just things that happen to me. This is real stuff I deal with. How's the beard doing?
Freshly combed out.
Good. Yeah, I
Wish
don't
I
know.
could. There, now it's all in frame. You just have to lose part of my head.
That's all right. Yeah, I feel like I can barely manage what I got. It's like a skill set.
Hi, my name's Max Allen. I'm a senior desktop engineer with a half-decade of experience in the modern and custom management of the Windows endpoint environment. I run the blog Azure to the Max, where I delve into everything from my latest Windows bug peeves to the world of highly custom PowerShell log analytics through the use of Azure Log Analytics.
I've talked about like log analytics in the past, and I've done some videos, but I feel like there's not enough folks who are really getting in there, especially when it comes to Intune. So, then you showed me your blog. I'm like, well, here's all the information. It's this guy. He's got it. And he's the one doing it. So,
right. So as much as I'd love to be talking about log analytics today, it is, we sort of talked about, it's a huge topic. I mean, there's a reason that my blog has like over 150,000 words on it at this point. My learning series alone is, thousands of words per article, and I think it's 12 articles long at this point. And that doesn't even get into the multiple deployment articles that I have after that.
Yeah.
So today, our little toe dip into that world is going to be sort of introducing us into more so the side of Azure Function Apps, and using an Azure Function App that's very similar in terms of the authentication that it uses and the concepts behind how we're going to make a call and how that call is going to achieve something securely in the cloud. That way, in the future, we can start to deep dive into more of the log analytics side itself. So before I get into the details, one other thing I want to add is that this solution is primarily, the way I'm demonstrating it, it's surrounding the migration to Windows 11. Part of me is surprised to have that as a topic still, but like you mentioned, we met at that conference, and some of the pie charts they were throwing up was about the percentage of organizations who have yet to make that switch. And as somebody who just got over their migration to Windows 11 at their enterprise, it's a little bit scary to see how many people have basically yet to start. So here's everyone's friendly reminder that the last version of Windows will be expiring October 14th, 2025. So it's time to get on it, because that's really not that far away, especially on an enterprise level.
And people, the funny thing to me in the two things, I won't go off on a tangent, I've ranted enough about it, but one, it's not a big leap. It's Windows 10 should not have had Windows 11 should not have had a number. It's just going to be this now. And the other thing is, it's like, I like people to say, well, we're considering Windows 11. Well, you're considering what? That's like saying, I'm considering if it's going to rain outside. You have no choice or power in this. It's going. You get to choose in the end if you've dragged your feet enough, and now you're going to owe Microsoft a bunch of money. I say to people, I know they're going to have end of life pricing. It ain't worth a penny. So don't even play that game. Just move the stuff over. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to cap myself there because otherwise it'll be a 9-hour podcast. But yeah, go for it.
So getting into the meat and potatoes, I want you to picture this, audience. You're an organization currently using Autopilot in Windows 10 today, looking at being on Windows 11 as soon as possible because you're trying to avoid those update charges and things like that. For the sake of having a clean slate, ease of testing, and reliability that the right operating system is going to get the right configuration during Autopilot, I personally, and Steve, I'm interested to see what you have to say about this, but I personally recommend that you dictate your existing group tags as Windows 10 and create a new group tag for your Windows 11 devices. While it does bring challenges to split the tag like that, my organization found that it is much better than the challenges of leaving things combined. If you need examples on those kinds of challenges, part of my first article regarding the solution has an entire paragraph that's probably should be broken into 2 paragraphs, it's so long, detailing what it is we ran into while we trying to all handle it under a single group tag. Any thoughts on that? I'm just curious to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think you come down to fundamentally, existing versus new. And that's kind of the challenge. And there are some differences in even menial things like settings and registry edits, but they tend to, little things can cause big problems, right? So no, I do like the tag. I know Microsoft is trying to get to a point where we're in more of this filter world. But the nice thing about that is group tags don't have to mean groups. So I know some folks have said to me, well, am I still going to be using, because I've been on about group tags for so long. People are like, am I still going to be group tags if I'm getting away from dynamic groups? Yeah, you can filter based on a tag. Even if you can't do it within Intune, you can do the graph and filter. So I think, yeah, the short answer is I agree with it. I think it's good for visibility. I think it's good for small things that'll trip you up. And you can still, if I have a tag that's Win-10 and then I have Win-11, I still have the ability to target anything that's tag starts with Win-. So you don't lose the ability to control everything. You just have again structured yourself in a really smart hierarchy. So yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome. So one challenge that separating your tags will bring, though, and it's the one that the solution is going to help us out with, is the scenario where you in-place upgrade a device to Windows 11. That device was born as a Windows 10 device, though, so when you wipe that device, which will cause it to wipe and return to the Windows 11 out-of-box experience, it's now staring down the barrel of your Windows 10 Autopilot solution. So, like you just said, some of those little things, like a simple start menu policy that changed, or controlling some of the start menu settings now that it's, centered and things like that, they're not going to work. So your device might make it through Autopilot. It probably won't explode. Maybe you've got some dynamic groups targeting your Windows version for after the fact, but largely what you're not going to have a good experience. And you obviously want your employees to have a good experience. So what do we do about devices that are migrating to Windows 11 in place, but still under that sort of older group tag? Again, that's where our solution starts to come into place. You need a way to identify devices that have made that jump and let those devices say, hey, I'm Windows 11 now. I'm ready to fall underneath our organization's Windows 11 group tag.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. That would be helpful.
So in order to accomplish this, the first thing that we're going to need is a client-side script. That's something that can execute on devices, determine what action to take, and coordinate back and forth with their Azure Function app. So if you look at our Visio flowchart here, I know it looks a little bit scary. There's some things in terms in here that people might not recognize. But basically, all that's happening is Microsoft Intune proactive remediations are kicking down a PowerShell script to our client, and that's going to be our step 1. We want that script to, first of all, validate that it's running on an applicable device. This case is that device running Windows 11, for instance. We want it to be aware of the current group tag the device already has. That way it can make some determinations about whether or not action is really needed. And if action is needed, that's the point where we start to reach out to our function app in order to securely request that change happen. We also need that function app. That's what's going to receive those requests, validate them safely, action on them if needed, and report back to the client-side script. That function app also includes logging. That's what our application insights is for. That's for troubleshooting or really any other investigation that you need to do if you want to better understand what that function app is doing. All in all, though, easier said than done, especially making the Visio chart as opposed to producing the real product. So let's get into the nitty gritty a little bit.
I got a question real quick. You might answer it.
Sure.
So how are you? So the client side script is seeing if the device is Windows 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
It's also checking the group tag. How is it checking the group? It's just making a graph call against.
We'll get to that.
Okay, good.
It's a little bit of backwards logic to understand it, but we'll get there. So
I like it.
Before we can do anything else, again, we need to first deliver the script to the device. To accomplish this, we're going to use interim proactive remediations to schedule the script to run on a periodic basis. If there's anyone that doesn't know, proactive remediations basically in-tune cloud-based task scheduler for PowerShell scripts. So here's my group, here's my script, run it every so often. Luckily, there are numerous ways that you can actually scope the remediation to run. You could create a dynamic group of Windows 11 devices by targeting the operating system version. If you're manually assigning what devices can actually run the update through a group, then you could tie that same group back to the proactive remediation. Or, because the script contains logic to determine what's applicable and what's not, you could also just blast it out to everything and code logic in to determine what you want to do. For an example of what I mean by that, in this case, there are a few things the tool already checks before we let it do anything. First of all, is this a Windows 11 device? Is this some level of Azure joined? That includes hybrid. And is this likely an Autopilot device, avoiding things like virtual machines? At least in my world of Amazon workspaces and Windows 365, we don't need to worry about those as far as having an Autopilot group tag. So if I see that on the device, then I'll just go ahead and ignore it. Again, you can alter or change any of that logic to your heart's content to look for other needs and scenarios. If all of our checks look good, the next thing we want to do is save some money. To accomplish that, rather than having the script call the function app each and every time it executes, we're going to keep a log file on the device of what our last known tag was that the function app reported. That's what lets us know if we already have the tag we want. And if that's the case, we can double check when we obtained that tag. And if it's not been sufficient time, then we won't bother reaching out. So if your device has already ran this script once, that's the key, is it has to do it once, and it's already requested its tag change, and it's already succeeded in that tag change, then it's going to look at its little log file and say, oh, I'm still looking for this tag A. I got a confirmation from the function app. I'm under tag A 3 days ago. I don't need to run this check again for a month. And that's a customizable value. So if you don't ever want it to check again, then you can just punch in a million days. But I like to personally have it check every 30 days or so because, frankly, it's very cheap to have it do so. It's something we'll talk about later. And I don't have a reason for it not to do that. Again, that's all just in the effort of saving money. Does that help see where your question's going?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I like that you're not, just slamming the device. I see that too much with remediation. So, being smart about it, running, being kind of reserved, and I think taking the extra steps to make sure it's only running when it needs. So yeah, so far this is really, really well thought out.
Thank you. So once we look at that log file, we'll help determine that either A, if we're already under the right tag, or B, if we're under a different tag now, we need to request a change, or C, this is the first time the script's ever ran and it doesn't have anything in the log file, so it's going to go ahead and make a request just to be safe. The first step in calling our function app is going to be building authentication. Unfortunately, that topic is something that could be an entire episode on its own. Yeah. The important part to know for now is that this is where we reach out to the function app and we ask it to change our device to a certain tag, and part of that request is proving that we're that device in question. And the function app will include logic to make sure that we only action on our device and to authenticate that request. So when our function app receives that request, again, it will validate that claim came from the right device, and it will validate that we can prove that we're that device. Before we can change a tag, we actually have to look the device up by its serial number, though. Part of that lookup very conveniently contains the current tag of the device. That gives us an opportunity to see if the tag the device is requesting is already the tag the device is under. If that's the case, then all our function app has to do is say, hi device, you're already under that tag. Here's a confirmation of exactly what it is straight out of graph. That way we can avoid making unnecessary graph calls when we don't need to. Again, it's all about just load balancing, saving on performance, doing everything that we can to avoid unnecessary calls.
Nice.
If graph reports back and says, you're not under that tag right now, that's the point where the function app will go, okay, I'm going to go ahead and submit a request through Graph to go ahead and change that over to the desired tag, and then I'm going to report back down to the device what the success status of that request was and a confirmation of what tag I just changed to. At that point, that's when our client-side script can then log that interaction, log what tag it changed to, and that way next time it runs, it can determine whether or not it really needs to call that function app again, based on, am I already under the right tag? Has it not been enough time, etc.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
So moving right along, cost.
Yeah.
That's an important part of any discussion. If you're watching this video, odds are you likely already have the needed Intune and proactive remediation licensing. That's basically anybody with an E3 or an E5 license, meaning that your only additional cost in the solution is running the function app and the various items it needs, like a storage account, application insights, and the app service web app. Unfortunately, function app pricing is a painful topic that I have talked about and ranted about ad nauseum, both in the articles directly covering the solution and in my other function app articles. So if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of that, we'll have those articles linked. The best thing I can do to quickly cover the cost is to provide an example. What I can share in short is that in our environment, the client script is set to run through proactive remediations once a day on any device that is Windows 11. Our check-in period is set to 30 days, meaning that once the device is confirmed it's under the right tag, it won't actually call that function app for another 30 days. In the past 30 days, we have called our function app 60,000 times, and the total cost, including every aspect of the function app, that's the application insights, the service plan itself, the storage account, has added up to a whopping $18.84. That's like 64 cents a day, I think.
Yeah.
So
it's a tough thing because we've talked about that a little in the past, also like with the ingress of log analytics and the same type of thing. It's based on the call and the tiers change, but I think I'm glad you brought up the example, because that's the best way to look at that cost, because then people can say, okay, well, I know my environment. And just it does show you how cheap it is. It's not a big expense. It's just hard to show that it's not a big expense, because you could say to who's ever, you got to make the case to, yeah, this is cheap, but cheap to some folks could be $1 million, and cheap to other folks like me is a couple bucks. So that's a good example. So over 60,000 calls approximately, you're under $20, and I would say generally any organization that has an active Intune, Entra, Microsoft environment, you should have a subscription set up for these things, and hopefully I'll help you budget it, and you can see like your recurring costs like month over month in the subscription metrics. You can keep tabs on it too. That's good. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Those calls are not a lot.
So it's a little bit crammed Visual Studio on this device, but I'm hoping that for the sake of the audience, that just makes it easier for them to see.
Yeah, it looks good.
Devices. So configuring this is really not difficult. What is the tag that you want to be placed under? How often do you want to check in once you already know you're on the right tag? That's our check-in period. And there's some customization you can do around where you want your log file to be stored as far as monitoring, your last known tag. Outside of that, that's the realm where you're very quickly going to get into, customizing the actual functioning of the script. So for instance, if we scroll way, way down here, we're going to be checking, is our device Windows 11? Is our device not a virtual machine? That's the section where you can start to customize, hey, I want to do different checks as far as what my machine is looking for or what category I should be falling under. But for the average person, especially anybody that's just looking to use this for their migration to Windows 11, probably just going to be worried about changing your group tag and setting a function URL. You might notice my somewhat funny variable here. I am obviously not showing my function app URL. I thought about leaving it in there, because to me it really doesn't matter, because the authentication is not reliant on the URL itself. There is a key on the URL, but there's much more behind the authentication than that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, for the sake of audience knowledge, I will relay that those are globally unique things. Don't let that information out, because that lets people know your URL and they can start hitting it if they want to. They might not succeed, but it's just, it's for the same reason that if you've got a super secret internal company site that technically you can access externally, you probably don't want to go around on the internet announcing to the entire world what the URL of that super secret site is.
Yep.
It's just best not to. So I've got mine hiding in a little text file. For real deployment to your clients, you would put it directly inside the script. But again, the authentication is not reliant on that, and it's miles better than just relying on a key or secret that's directly inside the script.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and do an example here, and I'm just going to change my group tag to test. Change this guy back to false, which is how he would be in a real deployment. What this is controlling is whether or not we're going to reference our log file in order to actually determine if we need to take action. Because we're already under the right tag, when I go ahead and execute this, it's just going to look and see, hey, you're asking for this tag. That's the tag that I already see you being logged under. I've got no reason to do anything because you've not exceeded your 30-day check-in period.
Right there, I see. It's been less than check-in 30 days exiting.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's like we said before, it helps keep it from running more than it has to. So
Right.
it's nice.
Right. The remediation itself still has to run, but it won't have to call our function app, and that's where the cost comes into play. So it's a cost-saving effort, both in terms of how many calls to the function app we're making, and it'll also help keep down those concurrent calls as well.
Nice. I like solutions that A, start with a problem, a real-world problem. B, combine multiple things. Combines like using PowerShell, using Azure functions, using remediation and the graph calls. So like this is a perfect example of like when I break all these little things down, it's like this is why. So you can take them and make a thing. I know we kept touching on authentication and kicking that can, and what I really want to do is eventually, and I think we'll spend more time on it, like I think a big issue is authenticating, because it seems like okay, well, we store a client and a secret, you put a client secret, client ID in a script. So no, well, let's do that in Azure. So you do the webhook, and then someone says, well, you should obscure obfuscate the webhook. And then I think there comes to a point where you can only do like a good enough type thing. I mean, we used to have markers with serial numbers on the CDs. That's what Andrew Taylor always brings up when we get into it. He's like, people forget you used to have like. So, I mean, I guess, do you find that it's like a constant struggle between making things work easily and then making it secure, or are you pretty happy with the flow that you have?
It definitely was a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
I think up until I got involved, the project's name is AAD Device Trust.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that was originally put together by Nikolaj Anderson of the MS Endpoint Manager team.
Yep.
Gosh, I think the original repository is a couple years old at this point, and I stumbled across it by complete accident. He's somebody that I've taken a lot of inspiration from, and his work on log analytics as well as Jan Patel's work on log analytics. And that's how I kind of stumbled into that repo, and then I ended up hitting up Nikolaj saying, hey, this project's amazing, why aren't more people using this? Like you said, it's been a struggle, because up until I found this project, the way it was done was, like you said, you could have a client secret that was directly inside your script, and that secret could be tied to an app registration that had permission to do graph calls, and you're doing them directly from the device. And that was nice from a cost standpoint because you didn't need a function app, but it was wildly insecure because now you've got your secret with the permissions sitting right there, and there's nothing to stop anybody from yoinking that secret and doing whatever they want with it. And that's where the move to function apps started. Originally, even that wasn't super perfect though, because some of the earlier versions of a lot of the function apps in the log analytics world, what they were doing is you'd have a key as part of your URL, and that would be your first line of defense. And then your second line of defense was basically saying, I'm this device with this serial number. Look me up. I'm a real serial number in your environment.
Yeah.
That's good to make sure it's a real device. But it doesn't really prove that you're that device. There would be nothing stopping somebody if they could obtain that same URL, which is in all of the scripts getting sent down to your devices through proactive remediations, from then just needing to find out the serial number of a device in your environment, and they're good to go. They're good to start calling that and making changes through whatever permission it has. Of course, your function app would be coded in such a way that, you know, it might only change group tags or, you know, something simple like that. So it shouldn't be able to do anything under the sun, but there'd still be some access there that would be undesirable. It's all very, you know, on one hand, it's simple to achieve from a security perspective. On the other hand, it's not likely to happen, but we still want to make it as secure as possible.
Yeah.
The way that the AAD device trust works, though, from a very brief overview, I guess it's important to mention that I am a contributor to that project. You can see that on the official MS Endpoint Manager repo.
Nice.
But you can also find my fork of it under my GitHub, Azure to the max, same as my blog. The main difference between my fork and theirs is that mine has more documentation and a few added tools to help demonstrate how it works and help people understand it and understand that it's safe to use. I'm hoping that one day that all gets rolled together, but for now it's just a matter of finding time in order to marry the two things. And, you know, people have lives and are busy, and I get it.
Yeah, it's the time seems to get in the way. So, like, speaking about, like, you know, GitHub and everything. So the solutions on your GitHub that we looked at today, so you can grab it from there. We'll add that below as well. We're gonna have a lot below, so definitely check out the links.
Correct.
Final thoughts? Anything you want to add or shout out to the masses or whoever's watching today?
I should have shouted out earlier the fact that, first of all, thank you for having me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's just me and my little dungeon here.
And a second shout out to Nikolaj and Jan Cattell for all of the amazing work that they did that then let me jump on the train and help push that train forward. Yeah, I mean those are what enable me in order to be doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about because I got asked since getting on board the MVP group, and I've been getting those questions is, you know about it or this and that. Like it's really a very community driven thing. Like the community is good. I did a post yesterday on something, and immediately Rudy Ooms hit me up and said, hey, you got a minute? Like I want to chat with you about this stuff, and, you know, which helped me with my next video. So I mean, yeah, the community is great, and everyone seems to really just, you know, want to help everyone develop more, make the solutions better. So it's good. No, I'm glad you jumped on. I definitely think we're gonna have to sit down again and talk about authentication for this stuff, because it's a constant issue in my world, and I'd like to just you know, kind of really get into it. You know, I really appreciate you coming on today, man. This was awesome.
I am happy to be here again. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad that I got to demonstrate the solution, and hopefully somebody will get some use out of it.
Yeah, hey, listen out there. I mean, use this thing. This is, you know, I think everyone's going to need it if you're using Autopilot and you're going to Windows 11. So, no, this is great. All right, man. Well, you take care of yourself.
You too.
All right, later.